Good evening, Commodore fans. Alongside Joey Dwyer, I'm Billy Derrick, and we're broadcasting from Kroger Field here in Lexington, Kentucky, as we get set for tonight's matchup. Big matchup between the Vanderbilt Commodores and the Kentucky Wildcats. Both teams 3-2. Kentucky's already played 3 SEC games. They're 1-2. Vanderbilt sitting at 1-1 after the biggest win in school history. Kentucky coming off a bye week, but before that bye week, Joey, they had a huge win over Ole Miss. So tonight, I think a big theme tonight is how does Vanderbilt handle the road environment tonight? This will be the best environment they've played in on the road, but you combine that with a scary defensive line for Kentucky with Deion Walker and a couple of really good linebackers and Jamon Dumas-Johnson and J.J. Weaver, and it's a really good defense. I mean, people have called this defense elite at times for Kentucky. So I think how does Vanderbilt handle the challenge of playing on the road combined, because that's the challenge, when you combine it with a very good defense that can be scary at times.
Yeah, on the surface, it's a tough matchup for Vanderbilt. I will say, though, I don't think this is a team I'm willing to bet against, Billy. You bet against them all season, and they've just proven over and over again that they're the real deal. And we'll see if that shows up tonight. It is a tough matchup. You mentioned the crowd. It's going to be all black. The defense, I think, really is going to give Vanderbilt some problems. I think they're a tough matchup for Vanderbilt, especially with how much Vanderbilt wants to run, how much Vanderbilt wants to establish itself on the line of scrimmage. Kentucky has a really, really good front seven. Cedric Alexander said it's the best they've seen. And I think they're really going to challenge Vanderbilt. I think Diego Pavia is going to have to win this game with his arm at times. And I don't know if that's a thing that he's had to do for a lot of the year. I think he's done it at times, but I don't know if he's been forced to. I think tonight at times he's going to be forced to throw Vanderbilt out of some situations. And we haven't necessarily seen if he can do that yet. But, Billy, how in the world could you bet against Diego Pavia at this point? I think you look at the preparation that you've seen this week throughout this team, and that's a real positive indicator. You look at the Georgia State game. Clark almost predicted that they would lose that game just based off their preparation. You talked to Brandon Fontenette on Thursday. He talked about how they're dialed in, they're ready to go, they've learned from those mistakes. And that gives me some optimism that they'll be in this game, even despite some bad matchups with the front seven of Kentucky against the offense that wants to run it a lot, and the perimeter on the other side of the ball. I think Kentucky's receivers are really going to give Vandy's corner some trouble. Alabama's obviously did, but if Vanderbilt's defense can't stay off the field, I think you could really see it get ugly there, and Kentucky's not any schlub running the ball either.
Yeah, another big question tonight is how does Vanderbilt come off of the Alabama win? It was no doubt the biggest win in school history. We talked about it in the car on the way up. Is that the biggest win in athletics history at Vanderbilt? And I argued that it was. I mean, you've got a couple of baseball national titles, but that was a win that sent shockwaves across the country, not just in the SEC. I mean, it was national news, not just sports news. I mean, Vanderbilt beat #1 Alabama. So how does this team refocus? How do they turn their attention to a Kentucky team that is going to be ready? They've been waiting for 2 weeks to play. I think anybody you threw in front of Kentucky at home tonight, it was going to be hard for them. I mean, this could be #1 Alabama. This could be Georgia. This could be Texas. It's going to be a challenge for any team playing here tonight. So for Vanderbilt, that's what I'm most interested in. I think when you mentioned Brandon Fontenette, his comments were interesting, and also Clark Lee's, which has been really important each week. He's called, I mean, he's hitting 1,000 for calling victories, and he called the Georgia State loss. I mean, not saying he didn't say we're going to lose, but he said we didn't have a good day of practice. We're coming off a kind of a sloppy week. This Thursday, he said he likes where they're at. Now, he said the next 48 hours are going to be huge for this team mentally. So, and we don't know how that went. That was obviously a very important process, but mentally, I think they're physically, I think they can hold up against this Kentucky team for 4 quarters. We saw it. They can hold up against Virginia Tech. They can hold up against Missouri. They can hold up against Alabama. I think mentally avoiding those dumb penalties, the mental errors, the miscues, fumbles, drops, you've got to be very, very sharp if you're Vanderbilt tonight.
Yeah, I look at the Alabama win as something that could turn your season into one that is a special one, but it could also be a one-hit wonder. And I think Vanderbilt's looking to avoid being a one-hit wonder at this point. They're a team that has never experienced a win like this. They've never experienced a high like this. They barely experienced a high like Virginia Tech. And they responded positively to that, but this is a whole nother beast. Diego Pavia, how many interviews has he done with national media members this week? I don't know what that number is, but it's certainly greater than what any Vanderbilt player has done throughout probably school history. So there's a lot going on right now around this program. I think the biggest thing, though, is this game. And I don't know if that's the biggest thing in there. We're going to see that tonight. They talked about, especially Brandon Fontenette talked about how this is a bigger game than Alabama. this could be a program-changing win in itself. Not only seeing what they did last week, but being able to build off of it. This program far too often hasn't been able to build off of its success. If they can go in and do that tonight, I'd argue that that's almost as impressive as what they did last week, especially in this environment with all the things surrounding this game. Nobody talking about the Kentucky game. Everybody looking back at what happened in the past. I think Clark Lee's messaging has been, you got to burn that game and forget about it in a sense, but take some confidence from it. We'll see if Vanderbilt can do that today.
The eyes have been on them all week, and they've got to find a way to keep the eyes on them. It starts with Diego Pavia in the offense. And we talked a little bit earlier about what Diego has to do tonight. Now, if he can just be Diego, I think he has to be a little bit more through the air than he's been all season.
Yeah.
I say that because of Kentucky's defensive line. They're going to be in the backfield. He's going to get sacked a few times. Vanderbilt's going to have some negative plays, right? But that can't turn into a couple of fumbles or a tipped interception, right? If you're Pavia, you're going to get sacked on 3rd and long, take the sack. Or if you roll and throw it out of bounds, right? Be smart. He's been smart all year. He's only got one turnover on that strip sack, and that wasn't even necessarily his fault there to begin the game against Georgia State. But I think for Pavia, he is going to have to do a little bit more through the air and reach into his bag and maybe make a throw we haven't seen him make, or sit in the pocket and continue to make throws down the field. Because in my mind tonight, Joey, Kentucky will be ready for the run. I mean, I'm not saying Cedric Alexander will have a bad night, but I don't see this running game dominating like they did against Alabama. Kentucky's front is very good. So I think Pavia and the receivers, not just Skinner and Sherrill. We know Pavia to Stowers are going to do some things tonight. I think Cole Spence has to step up. Do we see a little bit from Bryson Coleman? Is that the first sort of emergence for him? He's been playing a little bit. Do we see a Tristan Brown? Does a McVay make a big play? I think you've got Skinner and Sherrill that you like, but I think tonight you need some more guys to step up, because Vanderbilt, I think if they win tonight, we're going to be talking about how Pavia found multiple receivers at multiple different times in the game.
Yeah, it's going to have to be the Diego Pavia show tonight, and it has been throughout a lot of the year, but he's going to have to bring it again tonight. They're going to have to extend drives. They're going to have to be able to avoid the big turnover. They're going to have to make a play in the big moments. I don't think this game is going to be 40-35 like it has been in the last couple of weeks. I think if they can hold on to the ball and keep long drives flowing and take time off the clock, I think that's going to be the huge key for them, and it has been all season. I think, like you said, though, it looks a little bit different tonight. I think Eli Stowers is going to have to be very involved. Cole Spence is going to have to be very involved. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Diego Pavia, and those safety blankets are going to be huge for him. They also got to hit on a few explosives, though, and they did that against Missouri, and that's how they kept themselves in the game, even when the offense was sputtering a little bit. And I expect it to sputter a little bit tonight, but Diego Pavia, when you get to 3rd and 10, when you get behind the sticks, which is inevitable, that's something they've been trying to avoid.
Don't make it worse.
It's going to happen. Can you make a big play in that moment? Can you avoid the terrible play? Those are the things that are going to determine this game tonight, and it's all going to be on Diego Pavia's arm at times, and not for the entire game, but there's going to be downs where you're looking and saying, Diego, go make a play, and he's done that throughout a lot of the year. Can he do it tonight with the whole crowd against him, with all the pressure on them of being a team that people are watching now? That's a huge storyline for me tonight, and if they can get anything out of Cedric Alexander and A.J. Newberry tonight, I think that's a win. I think it's going to be really challenging to get going on the ground. Georgia obviously had a tough time against Kentucky in just about every aspect offensively, so you're not looking at this game saying, man, Vanderbilt's going to run Kentucky off its own field with its deep bombs and with these crazy drives that are really impressive. It's, can you do enough and can you avoid the big mistake to stay in this game?
You saw against Georgia State and Missouri, illegal motions, false starts, unnecessary roughness penalties after the play. You didn't see a lot of that against Alabama. I think that contributed to the win. Vanderbilt played a clean game. They did all the small things well, and they're going to have to do that tonight. Let's go to the defensive side, Joey. Brock Vandagriff and this Kentucky offense is bottom of the barrel in the SEC. Statistically, they're only scoring 22 points per game. They're running it okay. They're more middle of the pack in the running game. And I look at Demi Sumo-Karmbe as a guy that could be an X factor tonight. If he gets loose on a couple of plays and creates momentum for this home crowd, that's tough for Vanderbilt. Now, you got to make them go the long, hard way, right? If Kentucky has too many quick drives, quick scoring drives tonight, don't think that bodes well for Vanderbilt. Do you need – I'm not sitting here saying Vanderbilt needs under 10 possessions again. I mean, if you get that, I think you're going to win tonight again. But both teams want to slow it down. But you cannot let Barryon Brown and Dane Key destroy you. And now Ryan Williams didn't. Even Luther Burden, to a degree, was held. But at times you saw Mookie Cooper and Marquise Johnson and those guys get loose. Now Vanderbilt was still really close in the game. I'm not saying if Dane Key and Barryon Brown have big days, Vanderbilt will be out of it. But you cannot let them just completely run you off the field. Now they might get their chunk plays, but you got to force Kentucky to field goals. So I look at the receivers, and we talked on the way here that it's going to be tough for the corners today. Not just one receiver. Last week it was really just one. I mean, I know Jeremy Bernard and some of those other Alabama guys are weapons, but I mean, if Dane Key and Barry Brown have career days, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I think that's a tough matchup for Vanderbilt, one that I'm a little worried about on the back end. I think they have to have really solid safety play today. C.J. Taylor and Ricky Wright really have to step up. Maybe Dante Carter or Marlon Sewell comes in the mix of play. They have to have really good safety play, and I think their corners have to do enough to contain those two guys. Those are two really good receivers that they've seen good receivers before, but I think every week in and out is a challenge for those corners, especially without the guys that they lost in the preseason. That's a position group I'm looking at and saying, it's on you guys tonight. You got to go help them win that game. And I think Colby Taylor's in for a game that is really going to test him. Martel Hyde is as well. Maybe Tyson Russell is. Back-end play is going to be huge for them. I'm not as worried about them containing the run. I think Kentucky does have a nice running attack, but I really like what I've seen over the last couple weeks. Alabama only had 4 yards to carry. Issa Wataha's really stepped up. Zaylen Wood won't be out there again, but I think guys have really stepped up in his absence. Langston Patterson's going to be a guy to watch. He's the only questionable guy pregame. There's some interesting stuff out there about his status today. So that'll be something. Maybe Prince Kollie has to step up. Maybe Bryce Cowan gets on the field a little more. Their playmakers have to make plays again, though, Billy. And I think one of the bigger things today, you got to limit explosives. Kentucky, I don't think, is a team that is going to kill you if you make them go the long, hard way. But if you have breaks in coverage like they had early in the year against Virginia Tech, against Alcorn State, it's going to be really tough. But I think Vanderbilt has maybe matured beyond that. And you've got to see guys like Brandon Fontenette, C.J. Taylor come in and make plays like they did last week.
All right, let's wrap it up with a fill in the blank here. And I'll start with you. Vanderbilt wins tonight if blank.
I think Vanderbilt wins tonight if Diego Pavia rises to the occasion, if they make plays in the big moments, and if they avoid the explosive plays on the other side. I think you've got to make Kentucky go the long, hard way, and you probably think Kentucky's going to make you go the long, hard way. Can you do that? Can you avoid the big turnover? Can you make the big throw on 3rd and 10? Can you make these little plays that add up throughout the game to be huge? They did it last week, and they played dang near a perfect game offensively last week. They're not going to have to do that this week to win, but I think they really need a really sound game plan. They need to be solid in what they're running. They need to be confident, and I'm really interested to see what the energy looks like today.
Yeah.
Are they a team that's hangover prone, or do they come out and look ready to play? I think that tells you a lot about Clark Lee as a motivator and what's inside of this team still, which we're still trying to fully figure out, even though we've seen it really good at times, we've seen it really bad at times.
Good point on Pavia playing well. For me, Vanderbilt wins tonight if they make Brock Vandagriff miserable, because he's been sacked 13 times, which is second most in the SEC. So every defense they've played has been able to make him uncomfortable to a degree. So we saw South Carolina really frustrate him. Georgia, that was a low-scoring game. They got a few sacks on him. Ole Miss, to a degree. Obviously, they ended up winning that game. But and Vanderbilt's defense can do that. They did that to Drones a couple of times on some pressure packages. They've done it. They did it to Milroe, where they'd send guys. Rinaldi had him there on the sack, and even when Alabama was backed up there, they called Milroe for being past the line of scrimmage. They got pressure. So the defensive line has been able to get pressure, but it's also Fontenette or C.J. Taylor on a blitz. I just think they have to make him hate his job as an SEC quarterback tonight. You got to frustrate him. You got to make him uncomfortable. And I might even go as far as force him into a turnover, force him into a turnover that leads to points.
And they've proven they can do that.
They have, and they've done that. They did it twice against Alabama. You had two. Anytime this Vanderbilt defense gets 2 takeaways, I mean, they win, right? I mean, they did it against Virginia Tech, and if you go back, they did it against Georgia State. Longwell, that was the only turnover there they forced, I think, and Missouri, we weren't talking about it, right? We weren't talking about, okay, Vanderbilt had a takeaway here. We were talking about their mental mistakes. So I'm going to go with that. I think frustrate Vandagriff, make him uncomfortable, and to go further, force him into a turnover, whether it's a strip sack or a pick six or whatever.
Yeah, I think this is one of the more susceptible offensive lines they've had, and I think they have enough talent to be able to exploit that. They don't have a game breaker. They don't have a Jalen Carter. We talked about that all year. But quietly, they've been pretty good in terms of pass rush. Miles Capers made that play last week, obviously. You're still waiting on that huge splash play from Corday Sidner, which I think could come today. They've got a lot of guys who have made impacts on the game, but you haven't really heard their name a whole lot. Today could be a day where you maybe hear some of those names, and I think not having Zaylen Wood again hurts, but they're relatively healthy up front there. So I think they've got a chance to really make an impact on this game. And their secondary guys, that's the big question for me, but you can really help them out with a good pass rush.
It'll be interesting. Vanderbilt and Kentucky getting set to do battle. 6:45 Central Time kickoff. You can watch it on the SEC Network. Keep up with our coverage. We'll be here all night. We'll have post-game quotes and stories and a live post-game show after the game. So tune into that. That's Joey Dwyer. I'm Billy Derrick for another Vandy Sports podcast.